So could you tell us a little more about growing up in the Valley? Your family was clearly prominent, but it must have been complicated to be a Latina in a sort of white-dominated world there.
Well, it was, but sometimes when you're young, you don't think a lot about it. And we were one of the first Mexican families that moved into Wapato. There was two or three families that traveled together, and we settled out there. And it was not easy. And my dad, as I said, we worked in the fields, and then my dad got a job at one of the businesses owned by another Latino there, and started work there. And then my dad died very young. My dad worked in the coal mines in the Dakotas at one time, and he had black lung disease, and he died he was 58. So my mother then had to support the family when my brother, especially my brother and I, were very young, and that's when she started the restaurant. And of course, then we helped her in the restaurant there, and there wasn't a lot of time for school activities because we had to work, and then it wasn't very hard, and it was very hard anyway to join any clubs or to be elected to this or be elected to that in school. It just wasn't the thing. Opportunities for Mexican young people. And I have to tell you another story that when we get where I'm at this point in age, I wished I would have changed my name back because my name is Maria Felipa. And when we started first grade, I didn't speak any English. Neither did my brother. And so he was Juan. They changed his name to John and my name to Phyllis. And it just stayed. And my mother, our parents wanted us to assimilate, to feel that maybe that would make us more welcomed and we would have more opportunities. And I never bothered to change it, but Larry always called me Felipa. And so at home they called me Lipa, or nickname, Lipita. But I wish now that I would have changed it back. And that's why my store is named Felipa. But that was one of the things, because it took more than just changing your name, to get you assimilated and to be accepted in the schools or in the community. And it was, it was hard. Even traveling in the 1954, after I got married, we traveled to Texas, and we were going to go to Mexico. And we didn't we felt discrimination in Washington State and in the Valley. It wasn't as harsh as say in Texas, when you stopped to get something to eat and it said no dogs or Mexicans allowed. Or you went into a restaurant and you didn't speak English. You couldn't, even if the waitress knew Spanish, you couldn't use Spanish. I mean, just things like that. And of course, they suffered a greater discrimination in those southern states than I think we did in Washington, although we suffered here too as well, and in anything, in both getting jobs, getting an education, getting a house, buying a car, you name it, So it was a proving point, so to speak, of how do you get accepted, how do you feel part of the school, how do you feel part of the community. And at that time, the churches played a big role, so which helped. But it just made you want to do something, that made me want to say, if I want to change, I have to do something, because it's like saying, somebody, when you hear people say, well, somebody should do something, then we need to think, well, what have I done, to do that. And there's another saying I love and I use a lot, is there are those who make it happen, there are those who watch it happen, and then there are those who wonder what happened. And we have to think about it that way, because it's not just one making it happen, it's a whole lot making it happen. And as Cesar Chavez would say, it's united. And I've taken part in many rallies and many walks for the farm worker, and Cesar Chavez was a good friend of ours and stayed with us when he came to Seattle. And so got to know him, and at labor conferences throughout the United States, we always, were with him. And but he was wonderful, and he says, if we can work together, we can make it happen. If we're divided, we can't make it happen. And he made many things happen. Many things happen. And so it's a matter of not everything is right yet, even though in Eastern Washington especially, where, say, Pasco's 94% now Latino, or close to it, the discrimination there is still big in many ways. But how can we change that? We have to have representation. And representation on the city council, on the county council, school boards, college boards, corporate boards. I want our young people to be president of a bank if they want to, or chair of a corporation, or to be doctors, nurses, or whatever they want to be, no matter what. If they want to be an auto mechanic, if they want to be an electrician, whatever, to have that opportunity. And we're not there yet, because we experience a lot of this even in our universities and colleges, where the opportunity is not there. When we passed 1079, I'm going to be out of track here, but we really had to get, I had to get a little bit, I and others got a little bit upset that the community colleges and some other colleges were not telling the students that they could do it. They weren't giving out the information, and we had to get on them to do that. And I'm sure the same thing's happening with the state needs grant. So, so growing up is still not easy for the dreamers, as we call them, or for other young students. But growing up and having good role models is so important. And I think my parents were good role models, and therefore gave me the strength to, and as my husband Larry would always say, to do what is right, to do the right thing, to do the right thing. And you may get bumps and bruises, but you're doing the right thing. And eventually you'll prevail.
Can I take you back to something you mentioned? Tell us a little more about working with Cesar Chavez.
Well, he was, when you were with him, it was like you were so calm. It was like an aurora was there with him. It was a calmness and reasoning and really inspirational, and, hearing the stories and the vision and where they wanted to go. And it was just, there was no question that we needed to help. We needed to be part of that movement if we were going to make a change. And we needed to support and to spread the word and educate people. So he was an extraordinary person. And when you stop to think about it, how many people have we lost? Beautiful human rights leaders have we lost at such a young age? And I don't know what that tells us, but it tells me that we have to spread Cesar's word and get more of our young people to be those kinds of leaders. Because he didn't do it for himself. He was doing it for what he strongly believed in a better world for those who struggled so much.
And you said that, would you just sort of repeat, because it'll make a great excerpt, the story of him, he comes and stays I'm sorry.
No, that's right. Well, you know, it was through working with the farm workers, number one, and my husband that was so very involved with them too and supportive, and with this, they were part of the state AFL-CIO movement, and so when Caesar would come to town, he would talk to the state labor council and to other union members, and then we would go and do the marches and the rallies with him, and got to know him and what he stood for, and continued to work with him. So it was, Caesar didn't like to stay in hotels very much, and if you recall, when he died, he was at a private home as well, and he had just been here 6 months before. And so, but it was sometimes, it's one of those friendships that you have a lot of friendships, but there's true friendships and true people and role models that you really admire, and that you know they're sincere on what they believe in and what their vision and mission is and what they're working for. And his family is to be thanked too for sharing him with us, because it's not always easy.
Can I ask you to talk about your marriage and your partnership and the work that you and Larry did together for so many years?
Well, it was kind of interesting. Larry graduated from the University of Washington. He was an economist and a CPA, and went to work as a CPA for a while. He decided he didn't like that. He wanted to do something for people. I mean, to real people. No, I shouldn't say that. He felt that he had been in the labor movement in San Francisco when he worked for the newspaper. And then so when he moved up here, he decided to get an education and worked for the PI and went to school and at the same time, and became very involved, of course, with the union, and eventually became president of the state AFL-CIO. But it was one of those two, like being an elected official, you have to support the work that they do because they're gone a lot. Sometimes there's controversy, you know, there's just a lot of things that are going on, and that, you know, you have to kind of raise the kids yourself if your spouse is involved in other things. But we I think that we shared the same passion and belief in who we wanted to help and what we wanted to be. You know, and what kind of legacy did we want to leave to our children and our children's children. And then when I became involved more in politics, then it was equally as supportive of me. And so that really was a partnership, and I think we were real partners.
Much missed, yes. Do you want to ask about politics in Pasco and
Yeah. No, growing up, were you? I don't know if you were already thinking about going into politics, but what was politics like in the Yakima Valley and Tri-Cities when you lived there?
Well, there wasn't much going on in the Yakima Valley at those times. You know, there was no involvement because there weren't a lot of us Latinos and Mexicans there. But so it was just. But in the Tri-Cities, it was getting to be a little bit more. But as I said, when I lived there, we were Democratic districts, and so it was getting involved. And to be really honest, I think there was more acceptance at that time of the Mexican Americans, the Latinos that were there, and we weren't illegal. All of us were legal and we could vote. The majority of those at that time, you know, there. And were more accepted than they are now. And that's sad. But it wasn't great because there just weren't a lot of us. My children were the first Mexican children or Mexican American children that attended school in Kennewick. And that wasn't always easy either. And my daughter, who was in the 9th grade at the time, I had 8 children. So when my middle daughter was in 9th grade, I had to go to the school because she came home crying one day. And she said, I said, what's the matter, Barbara? And she says, well, my teacher said that my last name meant lazy, Maltos. Barbara Jean Maltos. And I said, what? And my kids knew some Spanish, but they weren't fluent. They learned English, and being the only family there, was kind of hard to. And so I went to the school, and I said, well, the principal didn't want to see me. I said, well, he either sees me or he sees my lawyer. So the teacher did get a reprimand. She got moved out of that class. But I mean, those are some of the things that they suffered too, and called names, and people thought Beaners was a cute name, but it wasn't, and things like that. So it wasn't easy. And then I moved away in '76, and then later on, when the 2 representatives were retiring, asked me to move back and run, and I said no, I'm going to stay in Seattle. So, but it had a change there, that whole valley and that whole Eastern Washington changed, and politically. But it's getting better. It's getting more organized, and I think that the Leadership Institute, that the forums we're having statewide are going to make a difference, because we have people who are ready. They're ready to get involved civically and to be leaders. And we have a few that are on city councils and county councils. We have a Latina woman who is head of the Toppenish City Council, and with 6 men on it, and she is the mayor. We have a city councilman in Pasco, and we're trying to get more into being involved in education on board of trustees, and to be more active, especially in Eastern Washington.
You want to tell us a little bit about your current position that you with Seymour?
Well, I'm vice president of leadership, economic development, and I do legislative liaison work there. But the Institute is one of my major concerns, and I oversee the radio station in the community center in Granger as well. And economic development is kind of a word, kind of a takeoff, because when I was in the legislature, I did a lot of work to make sure we got some money for our institutions, and I call them like CMAR or Centro La Raza, and stuff. So it's just kind of helping them grow and to be able to get funding where they need to have some support. And that's the whole big different story there, our healthcare system. And I like it. It's very, very, and I work with Ricardo Sanchez on LEAP where we can, and to move that forward too. And that's really producing some wonderful, wonderful young people. And so it's an interesting institution. And you travel, even that, and you see it as I travel through the different areas in Western Washington where they have clinics and programs, and to see that there's still a lot of non-acceptance, that a non-Latino health institute or agency might have more acceptance because of the people we serve. So it's still, maybe it'll be with us forever, but we have to make it better.
talk a little bit about, how you got to know Tomas, and just a little bit about the work you all did, you both did together.
Well, Tomas is another, he really truly is, a lot like Cesar Chavez. What he did it out of love, and also his concern for programs and services for the people that we love, our community, our nuestras familias. And he was self-giving, but he always cared about other people. It was never about Tomas. It was about other people. And he worked very hard and sometimes not getting accepted. But, excuse me, I will say, Tomas also shared Cesar's nonviolence, and I was very honored to be able to do a resolution on the floor of the House for Tomas a few years ago, and to recognize him, and because he was just so giving. And again, he had a family that loved him and supported him, because he wasn't in it for the money, that's for sure. It was all about giving and to make things better. But he never gave up either, and he and Larry were sleeping over in the state capitol overnight, and they slept on the stairs outside of the state capitol. They had a rally. And Larry tells me, he says, Tomas, why are we doing this? These are pretty hard stairs here. And Tomas looked at Larry, kind of looking at him and smiling. And Larry says, I know, it's the right thing to do. So they were great friends.
I think this has been wonderful. Really.
Well, I don't know how much I provided. There's so much. There's just so much to tell.